What's up, everyone? I'm Joe Pompliano, and this is the Joe Pomp Show. The NFL just wrapped up its third straight week of international games in London, and the league's eventual expansion into the UK has become a very hot topic of conversation. For example, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell has long publicly spoken about the idea of adding a permanent franchise in the UK, and he even recently said that the NFL has discussed the possibility of holding a Super Bowl in London. So today I'm going to explain exactly how this would work and why I am not nearly as bullish on this as some other people. But let's start with the obvious. The NFL is the world's most profitable sports league. Anyone that has followed this channel, listened to my podcast or whatever, you know this by now. They make more money in a single year, revenue-wise, than the Premier League, La Liga, Serie A, Bundesliga, and League One combined. Literally the five largest soccer leagues in the world, the NFL makes more in annual revenue than those five combined. And not to mention that the average regular season game for the NFL, call it Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football, primetime games average 2 to 3 times more viewers than the NBA Finals. The NFL is massive. But the reality is that the NFL is still really just an American sports league. If you look at the NBA, Premier League, even Formula One, all of those leagues have captured global fans. They have fans all over the world. The NFL is really still just an American sports league. Many people outside of the United States don't give a crap about the NFL. Now, this hasn't been for a lack of effort. From 1926 to 2005, the NFL held over 50 exhibition games internationally. We're talking about places like Japan, the United Kingdom, Germany, Spain, Mexico, Ireland, Australia, and Sweden. And furthermore, from 1991 to 2007, the NFL subsidized NFL Europe. For those of you that don't remember, NFL Europe was essentially just another professional football league designed to grow the game internationally by placing teams throughout Europe. But Roger Goodell became commissioner in 2006, and he decided to shake things up. He looked at the landscape and he said, this is not working. So the first thing that he did was he shut down NFL Europe after 16 seasons. The league was reportedly losing about $30 million a year on the endeavor. And what he did instead was he launched the International Series. Now, when he announced this, many people laughed at it. They said, this isn't a serious attempt. You're just going to go play a game a year in London or other places like that. NFL Europe was obviously a more structured and deeper investment from the NFL. But the International Series has been much more successful than NFL Europe or anything else that the NFL has done. The reason it has become so successful is because the NFL has become committed to it over the last decade. They've played over 40 regular season games in places like the United Kingdom, Mexico, and Germany. Germany, for instance, last year, there were 1.4 million people in the ticket queue to buy digital tickets online within 2 minutes of the sign-up process starting. Literally, it went live. Say it went live, I don't know what time, but say it went live at 9 a.m. By 9:02 a.m., there were 1.4 million people online trying to buy tickets to this game in Frankfurt. And the reason why that's so crazy is because that's 2 times more than Frankfurt's entire population. So internationally, these games have become very popular, not just in London, but in Frankfurt. The Mexico City game a couple of years ago was huge as well. And the NFL, it has gone so well for them that they actually decided to extend this agreement last year. They announced that the International Series would guarantee at least 4 games internationally every single year. And that meant that on a rotating basis, every single team across the NFL would be guaranteed an International Series game as a host over the next 8 years. So I don't care if you like the Chargers, I don't care if you like the Giants, I don't care if you like the Texans, I don't care if you like the Bucks. Your team is going to be hosting an International Series game over the next 8 years if they haven't already. Even better, these games are making a lot of money. All 40 plus of these games have been sold out, and the NFL is making tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars off ticket sales, merchandise, sponsorships, everything you can imagine that would go into the revenue bucket. But what's the grand plan here? I think it's become fairly obvious that the NFL at some point or another is going to want to add permanent teams and expand internationally on a permanent basis. Now, they have opened the door for this. In fact, former NFL Vice President and Chief Strategy and Growth Officer Chris Halpin specifically told Sports Illustrated that there's 5 criteria that need to be met to get a full-time franchise in London or another international city. Those 5 criteria are: number 1, a fan base that will sustain the franchise and sell out games; number 2, a stadium; number 3, local government support; number 4, working football logistics; and number 5, an owner that would move. These 5 options are great. They're needed. They're necessary. 100% agree. But realistically, there's 2 options that the NFL has here. Number 1, they could place a team in London. We talk about Germany, we talk about Mexico City, but London is obviously the epicenter of the international value for the NFL. So they could place a team in London specifically. We could do an expansion team, or we could do a current NFL team. Now, option number 2 is a little bit different. This would be an entire franchise, or an entire division, in London. So 4 teams versus just 1 team. And I'll run through both of these options because I think there's pros and cons for both, and then I'll tell you what I think is going to happen. Number 1 is pretty self-explanatory, right? The first option, which is moving one franchise to London and having them play teams in the United States. Now, you could move a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're the most likely option at this point. They've been playing games in London since 2007, virtually every single year. Their owner, Shad Khan, has ties to London as he owns the English Premier League team Fulham FC. And they're currently fighting with the local government in Jacksonville to try to get $1 billion for a publicly funded stadium that they need to build there. The government has been giving them a hard time, and a lot of the taxpayers don't want to pay for it. So now they're holding this over the government's head and saying, we will move to London if you do not give us this money. Now, Mike Florio over at Pro Football Talk has been quoted as saying, there's been a sense in league circles for several years now that if Jaguars owner Shad Khan ever did want to move his team to London, at least 23 other NFL owners would allow it. That's obviously the amount of owners that you would need to get the vote approved and passed to let the team move. So that's option number 1. Maybe you do an expansion team, or maybe a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars moves there. Option number two is pretty interesting too. Option number 2 is creating an entire division over there. Now, obviously, this would be a little bit better, and this is something that Roger Goodell has spoken about publicly. But the reason why it would be a little bit better is the logistics. It makes more sense to have a division over there where teams aren't having to travel back and forth between the United States and Europe consistently week after week. It creates the logistics and it reduces travel, and it makes it a little bit better from that standpoint. Now, both of these options I would consider are pretty solid options. And the reason why they're being talked about so much, in my mind at least, is because the NFL just signed new 10-year-long media deals with Fox, CBS, Amazon, obviously ABC, ESPN. They have Peacock in there as well. They have all these new TV deals, $110 billion worth. Absolutely amazing. The best TV deals that we've ever seen in the history of sports. But they're going to be in place for 10 years. For 10 years now, right? So if the NFL wants to drastically increase revenue over the next decade, where are they going to go for this? Sure, sponsorships will increase at a certain percentage year over year. There's kickers in the media rights. You're going to be able to get some more sports betting partners. You'll sell more merchandise. Ticket prices will go up. All that's great. But it's not going to make a huge, meaningful difference in the grand scheme of a $20 billion business. The way that they're going to be able to do this is by expanding internationally. It's the same thing that we saw with Formula One. It's the same thing that the NBA has done really well in China and other places like that. And the NFL now wants to do this too. But the reason why I don't think it's going to work is for a couple things. Number 1, if we look at option number 1, which is just moving one team there, I don't think that, first off, the Jacksonville Jaguars are seriously considering moving there. Shad Khan has talked about this a lot, and they play games there all the time. They obviously have a connection, and great. But at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to move one team there because it creates such a distinct competitive advantage for the other team, right? If you're the Jaguars, you're not going to want to pick up your family, move to London, and then travel for weeks at a time in the United States, right? Maybe you'll have a game on the East Coast, then you'll have a game in Chicago, then you'll have a game in LA. You're going to be on the road for 3 to 4 to 5 weeks at a time. And then granted, yes, you'll play 3 to 4 to 5 home games at a time, but that is a competitive disadvantage being on the road that long. And not only that, you have to remember that we're in a salary cap league here, right? So every team has the exact same amount of money to spend, and free agents are going to want to go do that when they have a similar offer from another team in the United States. You don't have to deal with different tax situations here. You don't have to deal with all of the stuff from a regulatory aspect of getting a license to work and live in the UK as a non-citizen. It's easier on your family. Your kids don't have to move out of school and stuff like that. There's just a million different reasons why players wouldn't want to go work and play for that team in London. And I think in a salary cap league, what that means is that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to have to pay more money than other teams to be able to go do that. And that's not going to work because there is a salary cap with the same flat limit. Number 2, you're not going to be able to do expansion teams because we have 32 NFL teams right now, and some of the play for people who watch the NFL every single week has been atrocious this year. I had Troy Aikman on my podcast last year, and one thing he specifically said to me that really stuck out was, I asked him about the future of football, and I said, is there anything that concerns you? And the normal answer for stuff like this is head injuries, right? The youth participation rate for football has declined over the last decade. Maybe people won't be as interested in it. Parents aren't willing to let their kids play. That is by far and away the number one answer that you get when you watch this or when you ask that question. But what Troy said was different. And it was interesting to me because I think he's actually correct. And what he said was that we're seeing a lot of really bad football, and that concerns him, right? This was last year, but I think it applies to this year too, so far from what I've seen. And his idea was that when you go and you negotiate the CBA, the players, they always want more money, right? They want more money. They want more money from the salary cap. They want to get paid more in salary. They want higher bonuses, more playoff share from the ticket prices and stuff like that. They always want more money. But the owners don't want to give up money. And that's the one thing that they do not want to give up. They don't want to give up money. That's where they make their money. So what they did, and what they do in most cases, is they negotiate. And with the CBA, what has happened historically is that the players, when they get told that they can't have more money, they go for the second best thing, which is less time at the facility. It's less time in training camp. It's less padded practices. It's less tackling. It's less everything else outside of money, right? So if you aren't going to get paid more, maybe you can show up to work less. Maybe you can take a little bit less of a toll off your body and so forth. And what I think that has caused, and what Troy Aikman's point was, that this has caused some really bad football at least the start of the season and historically throughout the season over the past few years. If you look at the NFL today, I mean, there are some terrible teams. I'm a Giants fan, and they play like trash every single week. But outside of them, you look at the Bears, you look at the Panthers, you look at a bunch of other teams across the league, there's some really bad play. And I think if you go to add more teams, if you want to create an entirely new division in Europe, you're going to have to add 4 teams, right? So you go from 32 to 36 teams. Those 4 teams, granted some practice squad players will get elevated and now be full-time 53-man roster employees, but then the practice squads are going to be full of USFL and XFL talent. And what we've seen for anyone that watches those spring football leagues is it's not up to par with the NFL. So you're further going to dilute the talent pool by adding 4 new teams. And granted, you're going to get some money from an expansion fee standpoint. You could probably get $2 billion a team if you were to go add them. But I think it's going to dilute the product too much, and it's not going to be entertaining football. Not only is it not going to be entertaining football for new fans in Europe, but it's going to dilute the product for everyone else here in the United States too. So I don't think that that's a possibility for a variety of reasons, but those are a few of them right there. Now, one thing to keep in mind with all of this is that we've sort of been promised this for several years now, and it sounds absolutely crazy to talk about in the context of NFL expansion, but hypersonic travel is legitimately looking like an option for the future, and I think it's something to keep an eye on. Now, this could be a decade out from now, but there are several companies that are making these planes that travel at nearly 4,000 miles per hour and would be able to get you from Chicago to London within an hour and a half. Now, obviously, that's significantly quicker than you would be able to do it today. And if that was a real thing, I think that it would be significant and it would be a determining factor to why the NFL would ultimately be able to go do this. Because right now, the number one thing, outside of dilution of the product, outside of players wanting to play there, is travel logistics, right? To get someone on a plane, make them change time zones and go somewhere for 6, 7, 8 hours on a flight is absolutely taxing on the body. And it's a huge competitive advantage for whoever doesn't have to do that. So again, I think that's something to watch. These planes today are not even close to being ready. The ones that are being developed by some of these startups only hold about 20 people, and they don't have any room for storage. Historically speaking, NFL teams need about 200 plus seats, and they obviously need a lot of room for storage of pads and equipment and stuff like that. So we're a far away from happening from that. But what I do think is going to happen, if I had my crystal ball and I had to look into the future and say, how is this all going to play out internationally? I don't think that we're going to have a Super Bowl in London anytime soon. We have 32 teams here in the United States. All of the cities that are publicly funding these stadiums are guaranteed Super Bowls when they build new stadiums. We have a wave of new stadiums that are coming up over the next decade that need to be rebuilt. And I think the NFL is going to continue to use that as a bargaining chip to get these stadiums built. So I don't think we're going to play one there. We don't even have to talk about the time of the game. We don't have to talk about the revenue that would be generated. All of that is significantly less than what we'll see in Las Vegas this year and other places like that. So Super Bowl out of the question for the next decade in my mind. But what I do think is going to happen from an international game standpoint is I think it just looks like the European soccer model. If you look across top flight European soccer today, we have teams like Manchester United, obviously Chelsea, Arsenal, Real Madrid, FC Barcelona, AC Milan. All of these teams come over to the United States on tour every single summer to play matches. Now, these aren't real games, which I think the NFL has a distinct advantage with because they have real games. But what we're seeing is that the NFL is going to do that exact same model, right? They're going to generate tens of millions of dollars from these games. They're going to continue to sell out games, and they're probably just going to continue to play more and more games there every single year. So instead of 4 games, maybe they play 8 games, right? And every team, every single year has a game, or half the teams have a game. I don't know what it looks like, but ultimately, I think they're just going to continue to follow that model and build up the fan base because you have to have more fans there to support these teams in the long run if you're going to have a European division. Could I see the NFL getting to 36 or 40 teams long term? Sure. But, in the bearish sense, I probably think that's at least a decade away, if not 15 or more years away from a pure talent perspective. These things take a lot of years to put together. You have to get groups to buy the teams. You have to get stadium infrastructure in place. Currently in Europe, really the only stadiums that could hold these teams are the biggest soccer stadiums. So we're talking about Tottenham, obviously, Wembley, and a couple other stadiums like that. But you're not going to have a home stadium for all 4 teams if you went there today because, Manchester United is not ready to host a team. Chelsea's not ready to join and host a team. There's a bunch of other soccer teams that wouldn't want to do it because you would be damaging the field every single week during the Premier League season. So this is something to keep an eye on. But drastically speaking, I don't really think anything is going to change over the next 5, 7, or 8 years. The NFL keeps talking about this. But ultimately, the thing that's funniest about this is that flag football could potentially have an even bigger impact than everything. All the people that watch this show and listen to my podcast or read the newsletter, one of the things you'll recognize that I talk about all the time is flag football just got put into the Olympics. And the NFL has invested millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars in their flag football program over the last decade. And the reason why they're doing that is because not only has youth participation declined, so this is a way to get people interested in football and have them do non-contact football until they get to high school or college, but more importantly, it opens it up on a global scale, right? Now that it's put in place in the Olympics, there's a certain number of countries, I forget off the top of my head, but I think it's maybe 30 or 40 countries have to be playing the sport and field the team for you to be considered an Olympic sport. So you're guaranteeing now that there's going to be a base level involvement at the youth level in all of these different countries around the world. And if they like flag football, maybe they'll like the NFL, right? So keep an eye out for that too. I think that's an interesting part of this entire dilemma. But at the end of the day, they're going to continue to host more games abroad. They're going to make more money. They're going to build more fans. And one of the other things that I'll leave you with is Real Madrid just built this new stadium. It's absolutely incredible. They have the retractable pitch just like Tottenham. The NFL is 100%, in my opinion, it is a guess. The NFL is 100% going to be hosting a game there over the next, we'll call it 5 to 6 to 7 years, right? So 5 to 7 years, my guess is that the NFL hosts a game there. It's a terrific venue. It's going to be amazing for Real Madrid fans and supporters around Spain to be able to go and attend an NFL game there. And it'll be a first for them because the NFL currently does not play any games there outside of what they did with NFL Europe. So thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. I hope everyone has a great day. Make sure to subscribe to this channel if you don't already. Have a great day. I'll talk to you guys later this week.